they never ask for what they really want. Oh, they think they do. They come to me with trembling voices, with eyes heavy from staring too long into a life that didn't deliver what they thought it would. They come broken or bored or burning with hunger they can't name, and they make their wish. Always so certain, always so desperate. But the truth is, what they ask for is never the thing itself. It's the echo of a feeling they once had, or a fantasy of something they think will fix the emptiness they're too proud to name. They say things like, "I want to be remembered," when what they mean is, "I want to matter." They say, "I want love," when what they really mean is, "I want to be needed." They say, "I want truth," when they mean, "I want to win." And sometimes, like with the case of Mark Rowley, they say something truly foolish. "I just want to know what would have happened if I'd chosen differently." That particular kind of curiosity, nostalgic, romantic, laced with guilt and longing, is one of my favorites. There's a specific flavor to it, like old smoke clinging to a coat never worn again, like a letter never sent, still hidden in the drawer, aging quietly with the paper it haunts. Regret is one of humanity's most loyal companions. It never leaves. It never grows dull. It only changes shape. I've seen civilizations rise from stone to steel to signal, and in every era, people have been haunted by roads they didn't take. The soldier who stayed home, the soldier who did go, the mother who walked away, the prophet who bit his tongue, the boy who never said, "I love you." And they look backward with such tenderness, as if the past owes them something, as if they could reach into it and pull out the version of themselves that didn't fail, didn't compromise, didn't choose what they chose. But they can't. And that's where I come in. I dwell in the space between decisions, in the thin, trembling place just before yes becomes no. My realm is not fire nor ice. It isn't punishment. It isn't salvation. It is a waiting room with no clock, a place of intent made form, of wish made law. You call it shadow. I call it home. And when you summon me, when your longing becomes heavier than your fear, I arrive. Not with fanfare, not with thunder, just a voice, a presence, and a contract as old as will itself. I don't twist the deal. That's the great lie. I fulfill it. Precisely. Perfectly. Mark Rowley asked to know what would happen if he hadn't chosen the life he loved, if he'd followed the music, if he hadn't become a husband and father, but had instead become what he almost was, a star, a voice, a name in lights. He didn't hate his life. That's what made it beautiful. That's what made it ripe. He loved his wife. He loved his daughter. He wasn't greedy, he wasn't bitter, he was simply curious. And I awarded that curiosity. I gave him what he asked for. I let him step onto the other road. Now, let me tell you what happened when he did. They always find a crossroads. Oh, not in the literal sense every time. Sometimes it's a church pew or a hotel balcony or the floor of a nursery where the crib has sat empty too long. More often than not, they find themselves standing where two roads meet, There's something primal about it. A human instinct carved into bone, passed down from ancestors who believed the spaces between were sacred. Places where one path becomes two. Where you might leave something behind or call something through. Mark Rowley found his crossroads on the edge of a small town highway where the blacktop split into two quiet rural veins. A place with no stoplight, no traffic, and just enough gravel underfoot to remind him how far he was from anything that truly mattered. A crossroads. Asphalt cracked from years of neglect. One road led east towards fields and fences. One west toward the lights of town. The third simply disappeared into forest. No signs, no paint. Just dirt and shadow and the sense that it had been waiting for him all along. He stepped out of the truck and walked to the center of the intersection. No flashlight, no phone, just the night, cold and heavy around him. He stood still for a long time, hands in pockets, eyes low. And then he said it. "I don't regret the life I've lived." His voice didn't shake. There was no storm in it. Just the steadiness of a man who has finally named the weight he's been carrying. "I love my wife. I love my daughter. I've had a good life." He looked up at the clouds. "But there's a version of me I never got to meet. A road I never walked, and I think about him sometimes." He turned slowly in place, taking in each road as if weighing them again for the 1000th time. "I just want to see it. That life. Just for a moment. The life I would have lived if I hadn't stayed. If I hadn't quit. If I'd followed the music instead of settling down. I want to know what that life looks like." He hesitated, then spoke the words. "Let me live it." Ah. There it was. The invitation. It never needs to be louder than a whisper. Never more elaborate than intent made audible. And Mark's intent was as clear as a bell rung in a crypt. I stepped from the shadows as the air thickened, as the silence adjusted to make room for something else. Something that had always been there, just a hair outside of his perception. 1 foot on the gravel, 1 foot on the road, cane swinging gently at my side. "Well, that was rather poetic," I said warmly. Mark spun around, startled. "Jesus!" No, I interrupted, raising a gloved hand. "He doesn't do crossroads. Too structured. I, on the other hand, do enjoy a proper intersection." He stared, blinking. Who are you?" I tipped my hat. "You called, I came." That's not possible." "And yet," I said, gesturing around us, "here we are. I assure you, reality has always been a bit more flexible than advertised." Mark took a step back, one boot scraping the gravel. "So, what are you, some kind of demon?" I smiled. "A touch dramatic. Think of me instead as a specialist, a broker of outcomes, a facilitator of possibilities." He squinted. "The Dealmaker." "Ah, you have heard of me," I said, bowing slightly. "I thought you were just an internet horror story." "All the best ones are, and yet somehow people keep telling them. Curious, don't you think? He hesitated, rubbing his palms together nervously. So what, you're here to tempt me? Ah, no, Mark. Temptation is for those still deciding. You've already made your choice. I'm just here to oblige. His brow furrowed. I didn't choose anything. You asked to live the life you didn't choose. Not just to glimpse it, not just to know it. You said quite clearly, let me live it. And I heard you, and I felt your intent. He looked stricken. I didn't mean permanently. You didn't say temporarily either. And I do take words seriously. You see, I'm very old-fashioned. I believe in precision, in honoring the letter of a man's will. Mark took a slow breath. I just wanted to know what could have been. And now you will. What happens to my real life, my family? I shrugged. That life remains unchanged. Just not for you. That's not fair. No. But it is just. He stood there, fists clenched, jaw tight. I could see the war behind his eyes. The father and the dreamer locked in one final grapple. Then came the moment. It always comes. A tiny flicker in the soul. I saw it in him. The part of him that wanted this. That had always wanted it. And it shone through. I want to see it, even if it's just once. I reached out a gloved hand and touched 2 fingers to his forehead. Then let it begin. The sky shivered, and Mark Rowley vanished. Not with a bang, not with fire, just with a breath, and the sound of an old song rising faintly from the road behind him. Mark woke to bird song and the faintest echo of applause in his ears. Not real applause, not yet, but some imagined version of it still clapped along the edges of his mind as his eyes adjusted to soft morning light filtering through cheap blinds. He blinked twice, then again, his vision swimming, his head swimming harder. He was lying on a couch, not the one in his living room. This one smelled like cheap beer and stale pizza and time. The walls were familiar, but younger. The scuff marks weren't there yet. The poster above the TV, his old concert flyer, wasn't faded at the edges. The stack of CDs beside the stereo hadn't collected dust. Mark sat up slowly, and the weight of his own body startled him. Not because it was heavier, but because it wasn't. His knees didn't crack. His back didn't ache. His skin didn't stretch tight over time-worn muscle. He looked down and saw forearms that hadn't yet known years of desk work, hands that hadn't yet buried a dog, built a crib, or signed 30 years' worth of insurance forms. He stumbled to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and froze. The man in the mirror was 21 years old, a little stubble, hair longer and messier than he remembered wearing it, a silver hoop in his left ear. He leaned in. The face matched the memory, right down to the tiny scar on his chin from a mic stand collision at a bar in Raleigh. He opened the cabinet, Advil, half a tube of toothpaste, a razor that hadn't dulled, and his toothbrush lay flat on the counter, green and white, just like it had been. What the hell? And somewhere, deep in the folds of his mind, something answered. You asked to live it. He walked back to the apartment in a daze, past his battered acoustic guitar leaning against the kitchen wall. He looked at the calendar on the fridge. It was real. All of it. The same date, the same week, the same moment. Right before he'd gotten the call that would change everything. It had been the beginning of the end back then. A phone call, her voice trembling. Mark, I'm pregnant. He hadn't shouted, hadn't run. He remembered that clearly. He'd sat down at the edge of the bed and said the only thing that felt right. I'm here, we'll figure it out. That moment, that vow, had closed the door. No more touring, no record deal. No chasing gigs up and down the East Coast. Instead, part-time work. A second-hand car. Sleepless nights and slow climbs. And eventually, the love that built the life he would treasure. Until now. Because now he hadn't answered that call. Not yet. Not again. There was a knock on the door around 11 a.m. Eli, his old bandmate, stood in the hall wearing a grin holding 2 coffees. You're alive! Or did you drown in cheap tequila? Mark took the coffee wordlessly. He wanted to ask what year it was. Wanted to ask if this was real. But the smell of coffee hit his nose, and something about it, its heat, its bitter edge, was too tangible to be anything but truth. Big day, Eli said, walking past him into the apartment. We gotta be at sound check by 5. We're third up in the lineup. If we nail this mark, we're in. For real this time. And just like that, Mark remembered. The showcase. Charlotte. Industry guys from Nashville and New York. It had been their break. Or would have been. The same week as the pregnancy. In his original life, Mark had missed the show. Called it off. Chose responsibility. But now the phone didn't ring. No call, no crisis. No tears on the other end of the line. Just Eli, babbling about sound levels and strings and how they'd open with the newer set list. The one with Low Tide Revival. Mark nodded slowly. He remembered how good they'd been. He remembered the way that one song used to hush a room. Something deep in his chest stirred. Something he hadn't felt in years. A pulse that wasn't about duty. Wasn't about love. It was about fire. The kind that burns before it warms. Are you good? Eli asked. Yeah, just haven't had coffee yet. Eli laughed. Then drink, man. You've got a record deal to win. The rest of the day unfolded like a reel from someone else's life. But it wasn't someone else's. It was his. Just a version that had been waiting quietly all these years. Like a backup file the universe had never deleted. The venue was grimy but electric. The stage smaller than he remembered but more alive. He touched his guitar and felt the years peel away. His voice was stronger than he expected. Lungs open, hands steady. They played. They killed. He felt it from the crowd. That click. That silence between verses where the air itself listens. He saw a man in the back nodding slowly. The kind of nod that comes with contracts. Afterward, beer in hand, backstage, Eli was nearly crying from joy. They loved us. You felt that, right? They loved us, he kept saying. Mark smiled. Not out of arrogance, out of something deeper. a kind of joy that felt like stolen light. He didn't think about the porch light at home, didn't think about the cracked tile or the daughter whose name his mouth hadn't spoken since waking. It was easy in that moment not to remember. Fame suits some men like a crown. With others, it drapes over them like a burial shroud. Mark Rowley wore it the way most do at first, with wonder, like a man trying on a suit he never believed he could afford. He ran his fingers across the seams, dazzled by the shine, oblivious to how tight it would become around his throat. I watched from the wings, from the camera flashes, from the silence just before the encore. My place is always just outside the spotlight, close enough to feel the heat, but not so near as to cast a shadow. That's the trick, really. You never see me in the story until the end, and by then it's far too late. His rise was fast. Fame often is these days. People confuse velocity with destiny. They don't realize how little resistance the world offers to someone who finds it entertaining. The industry latched onto him like it had just rediscovered sincerity. "Mark Rowley has the voice of a man who's already lived," one critic wrote. Another, "He sings like someone who's loved hard, lost harder, and somehow came through brighter." How right they were. He poured it all into the songs. The warmth, the ache, the tenderness he didn't even realize that had followed him from the other life. Echoes of lullabies once sung to a daughter whose name he had started to forget. I could see it in his eyes, even when he smiled. That ghost, a faint pull in his chest, nothing he could name, just a tiny dissonance beneath every note he played. But in the beginning, he didn't question it. Why would he? The girls adored him. Not just for his looks, though those helped. His younger self had been sharper, less softened by time, but for how present he seemed, or that's what everyone said. Mark Rowley looked you in the eyes when he sang, made you believe you mattered, even in a crowd of 10,000. He didn't know it yet, but that was the residue of another life still clinging to him. A life where he had mattered, intimately, daily, where he wasn't adored by strangers but known by a handful of people who would have crawled through fire for him. But this version of Mark was adored by millions. He played to sold-out halls, did interviews on late-night shows, won awards and forgot where he put them, wrote songs that made couples cry and critics sigh and executives smile. And he smiled too, at first. There's a particular type of smile I've come to recognize over the centuries. The kind that's built, not born. The kind you learn to wear because you've forgotten what your real one felt like. Mark's took longer to appear than most, but it came. They all do. The turning point was small, as they always are. A fan brought him a drawing backstage after a show in Seattle. A sketch of him holding a baby girl. It wasn't a reference to a song. Just something the fan felt, she said. Something that came to her when she listened to his voice. Mark laughed it off, and took a photo and signed her notebook. But that night, he stared at the drawing longer than he meant to, traced the shape of the girl's face with his eyes. Something about it hollowed him. He drank more after that, just a bit. Enough to soften the edge that had started to creep in. Enough to dull the question that began rising at the back of his throat. I watched him at a rooftop party in LA, staring out over the lights, half listening to a model tell him how his voice made her believe in soulmates. He nodded politely, sipped his drink, but his eyes were looking somewhere else. When else. That's how the past comes back, you know. Not in dreams, but in the silences, in the seconds between applause, in the way a name you've forgotten still sings when someone else says it. He started writing again, not songs for radio, but quieter things, unfinished lyrics scribbled on hotel stationery. Phrases like, "Your eyes weren't famous before they knew me. I remember something that never happened. And the song I don't remember writing still plays in my head." But they never made it to the studio. By year 3, the awards started to matter less. The crowds got bigger but felt further away. He dated women who mirrored each other. Faces changing, but eyes always hungry. He smiled in photographs, he laughed on cue. But I could see the ache growing in him. He was successful, he was admired. He had become the man he'd always dreamed of being. And still something in him mourned. He didn't know why, but I did. Because Mark Rowley had made his choice. He asked to live the life he didn't choose. And that's exactly what he was doing. To the letter. To the end. I watched from the alley across the street, leaning on my cane, a shadow draped in midnight silk. Mark tried to hide the regret. Hide it in tour schedules, press appearance, collaborations, and after-parties. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in June during a radio interview. The host, a chipper young man with perfectly disheveled hair, asked a routine question. "So, what drives your writing, Mark? What do you pull from?" And Mark, who had answered that question 100 times before with the ease of a practiced script, paused. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a full 3 seconds, an eternity on air, he sat there blinking. "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I'm writing to someone who isn't there anymore." The host chuckled. "Ex-girlfriend?" "No," Mark said, then softer, almost to himself. "Someone I never met." Later that night, alone in a hotel room he couldn't remember the name of, he pulled out his notebook and scribbled one line over and over until he ran out of page. Her name. What was her name? Memory is not so easily scrubbed. You can carve a man's path into new stone. You can press the present into him like fresh heat. But if a life once lived, truly lived, it leaves fingerprints. It whispers from the corners. And Mark, despite everything, had been a good man once. A man who had made hard choices for the right reasons. The kind of man that doesn't forget. Not completely. It started with a smell. A trace of lavender on a woman who passed him in a corridor. He stopped walking and turned. The hallway was empty. Then a dream. A house he didn't recognize, but he knew. A kitchen with cracked tile. A light left on over a stairwell. Laughter, light, high and warm. A girl's voice. He woke with a name on his lips. But it faded before he could write it down. On stage in Atlanta, mid-song, he looked into the crowd and saw her. Not clearly and not for long, just for a flicker. A young girl front row staring at him not with adoration but recognition. She mouthed something to him, something he didn't catch. He stepped back from the mic and missed the cue. The band stumbled, the song lost its footing. And for the first time in his career, Mark Rowley forgot the words. After the show, he didn't speak to anyone. Locked the dressing room door, poured a drink, stared into the mirror and the sweat still drying on his skin. He looked like himself, but inside, something inside him was still screaming. A week later, he went looking. No trace of her. No kid, no partner, no past. He called Eli, now his manager. Do you remember a girl named Sarah from back in Raleigh? Eli hesitated. You mean the one you dated for like a minute? You ghosted her, man. Left her for the tour. No, we were serious. Nah, man, you've been solo since I've known you. Too married to the music. You didn't stay with her for long. Mark hung up the phone. He sat on the hotel bed for an hour, staring at the carpet, chewing the inside of his cheek. Finally, he whispered, I chose this. And I, watching from the shadows, from the darkness behind a lampshade, from the silence between heartbeats, whispered back, yes. He asked to live the other life. Not to peek at it, not to dream it, but to live it. And I had simply granted the wish. Perfectly and permanently. They always come back. Maybe not quite all of them, no. Some die quietly, broken and bewildered, never fully understanding what it was they truly asked for. Some drink themselves into numbness. Some make peace with the wreckage and convince themselves they'd have ruined things either way. But there are always a few who come crawling back to the place it started. Back to the crossroads, literal or metaphorical. And oh, how I do love a crossroads. This one wasn't the same place where Mark had first summoned me, but it didn't matter. Any place where roads converge and desperation festers will do. This one nestled in a forgotten corner of California, where the pines whisper and no cell signal dares to tread. A little gravel vein cutting through asphalt veins. No different than the scars you find behind most people's smiles. He parked his sleek black car, earned with chart toppers and Grammy speeches, and stepped out like a man climbing onto a funeral pyre. His shoulders slouched, not from age, but from the slow pressure of truth setting in. Fame looked good on him, at first. It always does, but now it wore him and hollowed him out. He stood in the center of the road. Midnight, of course. He looked up at the stars like a boy begging the sky to answer for a broken toy. I want to speak to you, he called out. That's not how it works, of course, but I let him have it. I know you're listening. I know you're there. So full of certainty now. Fascinating. So sure of my existence now that his world had soured. You gave me what I asked for. Fine. But I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know it would erase everything. Her? My daughter, whose face I can't remember? The life I lived, the life I loved? I want it back. Ah, there it is. The soft, inevitable cry of every mortal who believes consequences are negotiable. That's when I stepped into the scene, as I always do, unrushed and unannounced. You know, I said, brushing a speck of lint from my otherwise immaculate coat. I rarely get callbacks. He turned, startled. Not frightened anymore, just haunted. Most of them lose the fear by this point. That's always a shame. I do enjoy some good fear. Most people spend the rest of their wish running from the consequence, I continued, strolling casually into view, my cane tapping gently on the gravel. But not you, I'll give you that. You've got courage, Mark, or foolishness. Sometimes they look the same. You tricked me." "No," I said, smiling softly. "You spoke the words, I listened. You knew what I meant, and I honored what you said." I let the words linger between us like perfume. "That's the difference between you and me, Mark. You deal in feelings. I deal in facts. I don't guess. I don't interpret. I fulfill." I didn't want to lose them." "Oh, but you didn't say that, did you?" I stepped closer, watching the anger war with sorrow in his eyes. "You didn't ask to keep them. You didn't ask to remember them. You said, and I quote, 'Let me live it.'" He flinched just slightly. That's when I knew the knife had touched something soft. He looked away. "I just wanted to know what could have been." "And now you do." I adjusted my gloves casually, like a surgeon preparing for a delicate incision. "You wanted a life you didn't choose, and I let you live it. You wanted the road not taken, so I paved it beneath your feet." "I didn't want this." I circled him, as the stars watched in their cold indifference. "Oh, but you did. You craved this. You don't remember how it felt that night, how sharp the longing was. It's easy to lie to yourself after the fact. Regret is always loudest at the end of a bad story. But I was there at the beginning. I heard the music behind your eyes when you made your wish." "You knew I'd suffer." "I suspected, but suffering is never my intent. Suffering is the price of awareness. I give people exactly what they ask for, and if it hurts, it's only because the truth often does." "Why do you do this?" Finally, the real question. I stopped circling and met his eyes. "Because your kind never understands what you already have. You are a species addicted to elsewhere. You chase futures, romanticize past, and sabotage the present with your endless what-ifs. I give you one thing the universe never does." "What?" "Closure." He stared, silent. I stepped closer. "You are the one who asked for the other life, and now you know it. You tasted it, lived it, and still you yearn for the one you gave up. That's not my cruelty, Mark. That's your nature. Please give me a way back." I tilted my head. "You think I'm a god. I'm not." "Please." "No." "Why?"
"Because the rule is what makes the deal sacred. You think pain makes a wish invalid. You think regret entitles you to a refund. No, Mark. You knew the cost, you just didn't ask the price. Here's the truth no one dares say out loud. You could still be happy,
Here, in this version, you could marry again, start over, find something new and different. Not what you lost, but something real. But you won't. Why? Because, again, it's your nature. You've tasted meaning, and anything less tastes like ash. Do you feel anything? I turned, and for the first time I let him see it. Just a glimpse. A flicker behind my smile. A shadow that didn't move with the wind. I feel everything, Mark. Every time. That's what makes me better than you. I adjusted my hat, stepped into the dark, and was gone. Just like that, leaving only silence and starlight, and a man kneeling at the intersection of what he wanted and what he lost. And from the shadows, he heard my laugh.